Order, please. Before we begin the daily routine, the subject for this evening's light debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Cape Breton South. Therefore, be resolved, the Ham government has abandoned its commitment to health care in the Annapolis Valley. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the daily routine presenting and reading petitions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition, the operative clause of which reads, children with autism need comprehensive evaluation and specialized behavioral and education programs. Appropriate treatment can have a positive impact on a child's development and produce an overall reduction in disruptive behaviors and symptoms. Early intervention is critical if children with ASD are to integrate into the school system effectively. As parents, we want the best for our children. And it is signed by 4,374 individuals from around the province, Mr. Speaker, and I have affixed my signature.
Petition is tabled. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In connection with the petition that I have just tabled, I would like to introduce to the House of Assembly a number of individuals who are now in our gallery, who are here today to watch the proceedings and to make representations with respect to the need for assistance for children with autism. I would introduce to the House Margaret Lepresti, Dan Maher, Eileen O'Toole, Jim Young, Tracy and Gerard Avery, and with them is Michelle Beausoleil, who is an ABA worker. I'd ask the House to welcome them.
We welcome our guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Health.
I beg leave to table the annual report making inroads for Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation for the year 2002-2003.
Document is tabled. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas BSE is a very serious issue for our producers in Nova Scotia, and whereas many farmers and those associated with the beef industry have suffered income and business losses, and whereas the Department of Agriculture established an agricultural task force on BSE made up of industry and government members to look at the impacts of BSE and the income programs available to farmers. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House wish the Agricultural Task Force and BSE and the participating producers success in the 4 upcoming community meetings to be held in Wentworth, Antigonish, Brookfield, and Kentville over the next 5 days. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers are agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Eastern Shore District High School in Musquodoboit Harbour, during the aftermath of Hurricane Juan, opened its doors to the community to allow residents without power to have a shower or to drink a hot cup of coffee. And whereas the communities along the Eastern Shore were particularly hard hit by Hurricane Juan, and whereas many of the staff members, like School Secretary Donna Leibold, were without power but still came to school every day with a smile on their face. And therefore be resolved that all members of this House commend Principal Al Reiner and the students and staff of the Eastern Shore District High School for their sensitive and compassionate support of their community during its time of need. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 10, the Acts of 1994-95, the Workers' Compensation Act, and Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 10 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Workers' Compensation Act, and Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Bill 20, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 10 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Workers' Compensation Act, and Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Order this bill be read a second time at a future date. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 475, Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act, and to repeal Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1997, second session, the Highway Workers Collective Bargaining Act.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act, and to repeal Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1997, second session, the Highway Workers Collective Bargaining Act.
Bill 21, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 475 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Trade Union Act, and to repeal Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1997, second session, the Highway Workers Collective Bargaining Act.
Order this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I will move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today, October 16, 2003, Sidney Crosby of Cole Harbour will be playing in the Metro area for the first time since he joined a Quebec Major Junior Hockey League team. And whereas Sidney Crosby's talent has already made him a star of the Quebec League and the object of even greater interest from fans and scouts, and whereas the Rimouski Oceanic Organization and Sidney Crosby are working well to minimize the pressure on him, respecting the fact that he is 16 years old, and help him focus on developing his abilities. Therefore, be it resolved that this House joins with Nova Scotians in welcoming Sidney Crosby's return as a Quebec Major Junior League player and encouraging all those who are helping him deal so well with the inevitable pressure and challenges that he faces. Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on September 6 this year, Rick Beaton was appointed Chairman and CEO of the Cape Breton Growth Fund, and whereas other new board members include Greg Lynch, Judy Steele, Lauren Tweedy, David Andrews, and Tom Rankin. And whereas the CBGF is a partnership between the Government of Canada and the Province of Nova Scotia and has a mandate to assist in the transition of the Cape Breton economy. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Rick Beaton, Greg Lynch, Judy Steele, Lauren Tweedy, David Andrews, and Tom Rankin on their appointments to the Board of Directors of the Cape Breton Growth Fund. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Rotary Foundation is supported solely by voluntary contributions from Rotarians and their friends who share the vision of a better world, and whereas the Paul Harris Fellow is a recognition of those Rotarians who contribute a gift or have a gift contributed by others of more than $1,000 to the organization to maintain its good works, and whereas Kentville Rotary Club members Greg Tefry, Doris Vino, Joe Euping, Agnes Miller, and Peter Smith all recently were presented with the Paul Harris Fellowship. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House join me in recognizing Rotarians Greg Tefry, Doris Vino, Joe Euping, Angus Miller, and Peter Smith for their service to the community and congratulate them on their receipt of Paul Harris Fellowships. I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas federal Liberal leader-designate Paul Martin removed the Canadian flag from his Canada Steamship Line vessels, registering them instead with countries like Vanuatu, which has a smaller population than the city of Halifax. And whereas Mr. Martin has not yet explained why someone who refused to fly the Canadian flag should be welcomed as Prime Minister. And whereas Canadians can help Mr. Martin choose which flag he will choose for the Peace Tower on a new website, www.flyourflag.ca. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges all Nova Scotians in the seafaring tradition of our province to select a foreign or corporate flag Mr. Martin might want to fly from the Peace Tower by going to website www.flyourflag.ca. I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
For waiver. There are several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton West. Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in Blue Book 1 and Blue Book 2, Premier John Ham promised that his government would consult and cooperate with all affected stakeholders on matters of public policy. And whereas the UNSM is totally opposed to the idea of a plebiscite on Sunday shopping in next year's municipal elections. And whereas both the Liberal and NDP caucuses are publicly opposed to this proposed plebiscite, therefore be it resolved, Premier John Ham explained the dichotomy of his words and his actions. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Here are several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 9 local fire departments visited Frank H. McDonald School in Sutherland's River recently as part of National Fire Prevention Week. Yes. And whereas Little Harbour Fire Chief and Coordinator for school visits for the eastern end of Pictou County, Don Wadden, made these visits possible. And whereas events like these are so important because children take home the lessons learned about fire safety to their parents and can result in saving lives. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognize Fire Chief Don Wadden and all those who work so hard to teach our children about fire safety and in doing so, make our communities safer. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the following resolution. Whereas yesterday's news report stated that Conservative Party leader Peter MacKay and Canadian Alliance leader Stephen Harper announced the possible merger of their parties. And whereas talks have been ongoing for some time about uniting the right in Canada. And whereas this may be the first step towards uniting Mr. Harper and Mr. MacKay's parties. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate Mr. MacKay and Mr. Harper, but realize that any meaningful merger of the right has to include Paul Martin. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver. Here and no. Notice table. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 25 years ago today marks the celebration of the election of Pope John Paul II as pontiff. And whereas Pope John Paul is 83 years old and approaching the third longest pontificate reign in history. And whereas celebrations, tributes, and masses are occurring all over the world to mark this significant occasion, therefore be it resolved that all members acknowledge Pope John Paul II on his 25th anniversary as pontiff. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia exports $1.2 billion annually in seafood, more than 70% of it to the United States. And whereas 5 border crossings in central Canada and on the west coast currently operate dedicated lanes for commercial traffic, and 6 more fast lanes are scheduled to be ready in January, but none will be found east of Quebec. And whereas the absence of the fast lanes or plans for fast lanes in the Maritime Province is further proof of the federal government's blatant disregard of the region's economic interests. Therefore, it be resolved, MLAs in the House of Assembly condemn the federal government's lack of concern for Nova Scotia's seafood industry and urge the federal government to fast-track fast lanes in the Maritime Province. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Request for waiver. I hear several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 220 years ago, Methodist preacher William Black laid the groundwork for the Brunswick Street United Church, which in 1925 joined with the United Church. And whereas through its congregation, volunteers, and supporters, this church has worked tirelessly to feed the hungry, clothe the needy, and provide support and hope to inner city residents. And whereas on Saturday, October the 18th, at the Holiday Inn, the Brunswick Street Church will host the Great Thanksgiving, an evening of maritime food, silent auction, live music, and guest speakers. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly thank the Brunswick Street United Church, the congregation, volunteers, and Reverend Gus and Lorna Pendleton for the vital contribution they make to the inner city, and wish them every success at their Great Thanksgiving event on Saturday, October the 18th. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Shirley Jackson of Port Williams announced her resignation as the chairwoman of the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board earlier this month, and whereas her departure is with sincere regret and sadness because of poor health, and who has earned the respect of AVRSB stakeholders from Superintendent Dr. Gunn to students, and whereas Mrs. Jackson has been commended for her gentle and compassionate presence, her wonderful way of working with people, and has personified the highest standards and purest motives, therefore be it resolved that members acknowledge the valuable contribution Shirley Jackson has provided to the Annapolis Regional School Board and her community, and wish her the very best in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a bevy of bovine beauties is batting eyelashes and mooing for the camera for Project Bovine Beauty to raise funds for farmers who suffered losses at the hands of Hurricane Juan, and whereas the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, BMO Nesbitt Burns, and the Rotary Club Halifax Northwest have launched an Adopt a Cow fundraiser this week to help farmers get their properties back in order, and whereas donations to this unique fundraiser can be made at any branch of Nesbitt Burns, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture, BMO Nesbitt Burns, the Rotary Club Halifax Northwest on launching Project Bovine Beauty, and wish them every success in this endeavour. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a community's history is part of the quilt work that makes up the province's historical record and is therefore worth preserving, and whereas a school is often a community's only surviving physical link with its past, and whereas the Maitland and District Development Association is restoring the old Salma Schoolhouse, which is a designated heritage building, therefore be resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the members of the Maitland and District Development Association for their determination to preserve their tangible links to their past for the benefit of all Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver, notice, and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Digby, Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in a ceremony being held this Sunday, 3 more names will be added to the Digby Fishermen's Memorial. And whereas this year the names of Neil Oliver, Randy Cummings, and George Robertson will be added. Whereas this monument is a focal point of a waterfront park which opened 1 year ago on Maiden Lane in Digby. Therefore be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge this year's names of Neil Oliver, Randy Cummings, and George Robertson to the Digby Fishermen's Memorial. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Art Dorrington, a native of Truro, has been named to the Atlantic City, New Jersey Hall of Fame. And whereas Art Dorrington, who also excelled in baseball, is known as the Jackie Robinson of hockey, being the first black player to sign with an NHL team when he accepted a minor league contract with the New York Rangers in 1950. And whereas Art Dorrington is being honored for his community leadership as well as his hockey contributions to Atlantic City, therefore be it resolved that all members congratulate Art Dorrington for earning a place in the Atlantic City, New Jersey Hall of Fame and wish him well as he continues his leadership in his adopted home community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas many green spaces in Dartmouth were extensively damaged by Hurricane Juan, such as Shuby Park and Sullivan's Pond, and whereas last weekend many generous people made pledges totaling over $1 million to help restore the public gardens, and whereas other groups have been contacting Mayor Peter Kelly in regards to perhaps beginning a similar fundraiser for other green spaces, which were also hard hit by Hurricane Juan. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate all those involved in the Public Gardens Restoration fundraising event and encourage a similar event to be held to help in the required cleanup and restoration that will be required in Dartmouth. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas after 2 years and a $10 million investment, the 270-meter Marguerite Harbour Bridge in Cape Breton opened to traffic on October 10th. Yes. And whereas travelers can now drive over the new 2-lane concrete structure which connects Marguerite Harbour and Belcode along the Cabot Trail. And whereas the new Marguerite Harbour Bridge is a benefit to travelers in the local economy that will move people and goods faster and more efficiently. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate the Minister and staff of the Department of Transportation on the completion of the Marguerite Harbour Bridge and on their commitment to building a first-class transportation network in Nova Scotia.
Was there a request for waiver? Was there no? Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if I might beg your indulgence to do an introduction first. I'm pleased in the West Gallery to introduce my wife, Marilyn, the back of the gallery. She's there with the crocheting, and I'd ask the House to give her a warm welcome. I couldn't get away without doing that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas singer-songwriter Dave Gunning of Pictou was named Musician of the Year at the recent Music Industry Association of Nova Scotia Awards in Halifax, and whereas this Nova Award recognizes him for music of his own composition, and whereas Dave Gunning has been pleasing audiences with his music for years, both locally and around the world, therefore it be resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Dave Gunning on winning the Musician of the Year award and wish him continued success in the future. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia, Canada's ocean playground, has more than 7,000 kilometers of coastline, where there is currently no provincial policy or legislation guiding coastal development in Nova Scotia, whereas the province of New Brunswick has published a coastal areas protection policy. Therefore, be it resolved that this government demonstrate leadership and initiate a comprehensive coastal protection policy.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Acadian Maple Products have opened an outlet at 1357-8 Peggy's Cove Road in Upper Tantallon, whereas this family-owned business is the labor of love of the Alloway family, and whereas this business is a welcome addition to our community. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate the Alloways on the opening of the Acadian Maple Product Store with best wishes and many years of success in the future. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Rob Assels and Leslie Longhorn successfully operate a certified organic general store in Marshville, Pictou County, and whereas their certified organically grown fruits and vegetables contain no chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, hormones, or herbicides, and whereas to become certified organic, producers must follow strict guidelines providing a guarantee to consumers that products are grown in an ecological manner and must pass a yearly inspection. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the owners of Longhorn Garden Market on the success of their organic enterprise and wish them continued prosperity. And Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day, oral questions put by members. Question period begin at 12:31, and at 1:31, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the rates of autism in Canada are soaring. It's now estimated that there are 350 children under the age of 6 in Nova Scotia with autism. We know that early treatment can change a child's life. On Tuesday and on Wednesday, we asked the Minister of Health when his government will address the treatment shortages in this province. He said his department is doing a thorough analysis and assessment. Yet, Mr. Speaker, the key stakeholders, the parents who happen to be sitting in the gallery today, are not involved. So my question, Mr. Speaker, is this. Will the minister commit today to include the most important stakeholders, the parents, in these discussions?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to comment on this topic because the department is indeed embarked upon an analysis of this, and it is something that I would be prepared to, the process is something I would be prepared to share with parents, and I look forward to meeting with parents in the very near future with respect to the entire topic.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we'll be happy to take the minister up on that and arrange for that follow-up, because parents across the country have been forced to take their governments to court for access to proper treatment. Courts in British Columbia, Ontario, and Newfoundland have all ruled that it is discriminatory not to provide proper treatment. Denying children treatment has even been called a human rights violation. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is the only province in Atlantic Canada not providing needed treatment for children with autism. Parents have traveled to the House today for answers, and as you know, they brought with them a petition with nearly 5,000 signatures. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is this. When can we expect Nova Scotia to catch up with the rest of the country and start improving services for these children?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I would anticipate that when we are in a position to act upon the recommendations of the group that is currently reviewing best practices both internationally and nationally, that we will come forward with a program that will be second to none in this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, parents like Jim Young are incredibly frustrated by the shortage of services available to children with autism. He waited more than a year to have his child assessed. He says there is a complete lack of services available, and like many parents, he has had to seek private help. This is a family of 4 now struggling with mounting bills. My question for the minister is this. The parents here today deserve concrete answers. How are you going to improve the services available for their children?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we have, in the past, added money to the budget with respect to providing services. We have more to do. and the review that is underway within my department is part of setting the stage for how we will address the treatment questions in the future. And Mr. Speaker, I hope that that process will be expedited as quickly as possible.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also wish to ask a question of the Minister of Finance on the issue of autism. This is Autism Month, and we spoke yesterday about this pressing issue in this House. At that time, I referenced a letter from an Annapolis Valley family with whom I have spoken. They have a daughter who is caught with an autistic spectrum disorder. They are not alone. There is the Averys, who have been mentioned by the Leader of the Opposition, the Youngs, the Jasonvilles, the Fentons, and other families all across Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, many of them are asking for the services of applied behavior analysis. We know that Nova Scotia is the only province in Atlantic Canada that doesn't provide that. My question for the Minister of Health is, why is this so, sir?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thought I had heard the Honourable Leader of the Third Party suggest he was addressing the question of the Minister of Finance, and my attention was not as focused as it should have been. If he could ask the question again, I'd appreciate it.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on the question only, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I've been so used to asking questions of the Minister of Finance or the Premier on finance questions. It was obviously a Freudian. I'm sure he won't. There's still time. We have several questions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too want to ask a question on the issue of autism, and I want to ask it of the Minister of Health. Yesterday we spoke about the issue of autism. This is Autism Month.
Order, please.
The question.
Order, please. Could you order, please? The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party. I think the Honourable Minister heard part of the question. If you just repeat the question only, please.
Okay. Why does Nova Scotia choose not to fund ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis, when the other three Atlantic provinces do?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The analysis we're currently involved in will address all treatment options that are out there, and when we embark upon a course of action, which I hope will be soon, a course of action will be based on the very best practices available.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the letter that I referenced yesterday from the family in the Annapolis Valley with whom we have spoken seems to put the finger on the point. In the letter, the father of this family states that the previous Conservative government spent an estimated $7 million buying votes through tax rebates. The math wasn't exactly correct, but nonetheless, the principle is the same. In particular, he said, I hope the Liberal Party will commit to providing the necessary levels of health care to autistic children should it form the next government. This is consistent with the challenges that are being faced by many families who have children with developmental delays. My question to the minister is whether or not he will admit that his government's efforts to come forward with a tax scheme that was untimely was in fact at the expense of families with children with developmental delays.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we have been increasing the funding for the health budget year over year. We have made long-term commitments with respect to funding, and when we have received the report of the committee studying this problem, we will ensure that funding is available to carry out that program.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this person also sent a letter off to the Minister of Health. And in it, he states, I quote, I recently received the previous Conservative government's one-time tax refund of $155. I am concerned that this happened despite the underfunded and inadequate state of our public services in general and our health services in particular. Governing is about making choices, Mr. Speaker, and the choices that this government has made certainly aren't in keeping with this family's needs. My question to the Minister of Health, why does this government feel that it is more important to go ahead with a tax scheme than support families that are facing these difficulties?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we recognize the need to address treatment for families with these difficulties. That is why we have developed the Neurodevelopmental Delay Standards Committee, and that committee will be bringing forward recommendations to the government, and I hope to be able to bring those recommendations to government in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Just, I'd ask the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party to table those documents you quoted from, please. The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is for the Minister of Health. Minister, a group of parents have traveled to the House today because they can't get the services they need for their children who have been diagnosed with autism. Tracy and Gerard Avery have twin 3-year-old boys who've been diagnosed with this syndrome. Tracy Avery knows that with proper treatment, her sons, Kyle and Brandon, would drastically improve the quality of their lives. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister is quite simple. It's when will your government increase the services for children with autism?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to inform the House that what we are embarking upon with respect to this matter is an analysis of the very best practices that are available. And when that analysis is complete, recommendations will be made to government, and I will ensure that those recommendations are brought to government with the intent of acting upon them.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we all know that this idea of best practices, while it's important, is a moving target. Best practices are always changing as the actual treatment and the examination of the impact of that treatment is assessed. So, Mr. Speaker, applied behavioral analysis is a recommended treatment. Parents in Nova Scotia are sinking into debt to pay for their health care, even though it's provided in every other Atlantic province and across this country. So my question to the minister is quite simple. How can you justify your inaction on this front to the parents sitting in our gallery today?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, when we embark upon an expanded treatment, we want to be ensured that the very best practices are being employed, available at the time we embark upon that program. And that is our objective, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member is quite correct when she suggests that it is a moving target, but we want to ensure that we have selected the best available at the time we embark upon our program.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, investing treatment will not only improve a child's quality of life, it makes economic sense. The Canadian Autism Society says it will cut autism costs in half and save $1 million over an individual's lifetime. Mr. Speaker, the parents who are here today are hoping that they will see action from this government, not talk about more study, more assessment, more review, more analysis. And Speaker, as you know, we've seen this with a lot of other issues here. So I want to ask the minister, what's your timetable for actually taking some activity to improve the treatment options available for families with children with autism?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Once the report has been brought forward to myself as the minister, and I've had an opportunity to evaluate it and bring it forward to Cabinet, I hope that that will occur as soon as possible.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance has become quite adept at sidestepping questions instead of telling the people the true state of the province's finances. Yesterday, he told our leader that he was dealing with a $32 million shortfall, but not the extra $22 million in reduced transfer payments. Why is the minister, my question is, why is the minister failing to deal with the $22 million shortfall?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member raises two issues. The first issue is the $32 million that we brought forward in the September forecast. Those were issues that we saw the revenues going down, so we brought that plan forward to work with it. She's quoting another figure that could or couldn't be. We have not defined the analysis on the equalization. All of the provinces haven't. If she's reading the paper, she will see that. And when that's defined, Mr. Speaker, we are dealing with that with the federal government.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, last April's budget is fast becoming irrelevant. A $32 million shortfall has turned into a $54 million shortfall or more, since the figure clearly is not yet pegged, and it may very well go higher. We're almost 7 months into the fiscal year, and there is still no plan. This government, with the support of the NDP, would not commit to rescinding a tax cut that we cannot afford. My question is again to the Minister of Finance. Why won't the minister admit that we are in a deficit situation in Nova Scotia that cannot be remedied this late in the fiscal year unless he inflicts massive cuts to public programs and services? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I mentioned at the time of the fiscal update, we knew there was going to be some corrections that we had to make this year, and that's what a forecast and a budget is all about. You project what you believe to be the best circumstances and how things are going to go. Whether it's your own home, whether it's a corporation, whether it's the province. We have to make adjustments as we go along to recognize those circumstances. We have started with our budget management plan. Mr. Speaker, we are carrying on with that, and it is our intent, and we are planning, and we are going to balance the budget this year.
Honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we are 7 months almost into the fiscal year, and the minister has yet to tell the people where he is going to cut and what fees he plans to increase. He refers to a budget management plan. Now there is another $22 million shortfall, and the minister won't even acknowledge that fact. My question again to the minister is, when can we expect the minister to tell Nova Scotians the details of his budget management plan and the specific plans to deal with the $54 million shortfall that we expect?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we have asked the departments to look at the opportunities they have to achieve some savings this year. Those plans are coming in. They will be reviewed over by Cabinet and the departments, and when that plan is ready, we will be bringing forward to all the people of Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Energy. On the heels of news that ExxonMobil had bundled the contract for the compression deck, and the Minister of Energy vowed never to let Nova Scotia get another raw deal like this again. He said Nova Scotia needs to be the principal beneficiary of his offshore, and to that, Mr. Speaker, we agree. That's why it's troubling to hear the poor return we stand to get from the impending deal with Access Northeast Energy for a liquefied natural gas plant in the Strait of Cancel. In Bear Head, the province is poised to sell the land to Access Northeast for a mere $2 million. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? Nova Scotia Business Inc. says that's the best deal we can get. I want to ask the Minister of Energy, does he support NSBI's position that this is the best deal we could get for Nova Scotia's energy?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And to that specific point, as the member knows, that project is in the development phase of moving forward and trying to facilitate what would be in excess of $500 million, something that the local area and both Port Hawkesbury, the Strait area, the County of Richmond have all been very supportive of, and obviously trying to be competitive in recognizing that Nova Scotia is not isolated and that in fact we are associated with other markets where we have to be competitive. And specific to NSBI, I would ask the Minister of Economic Development to comment appropriately.
Order, please. The Honourable Member Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
Hey, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to enlighten the minister a little bit and table this document, what a good deal might look like, Mr. Speaker. We're well aware of the competitive market in which we live, Mr. Speaker, but I'm going to table the document from a memorandum of offer between ConocoPhillips and TransCanada Pipeline Groups in the town of Harpswell, Maine. This deal, Mr. Speaker, will be worth $400 million US, the people of Harpswell, just to lease the land for an LNG plant. So can the minister tell this House why it is that our government believes the best way we can do to basically give away the land for a mere $2 million, while just down the road, across the border, some $530 million Canadian are being spent on leasing land?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, just down the road across the border, maybe the honourable member needs a geography lesson to the realities of where we are in context to the market that indeed that he would suggest we're not even accessing. And he should look at his geography and recognize that the toll rates as well as access to market are key and very important. So maybe rather than looking at what is elsewhere, we need to look at what the benefits are, and we are working to ensure that developments in Nova Scotia benefit Nova Scotians and not navel-gazing down the road at other opportunities that don't exist at this time.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
What we're talking about is, again, missed opportunities for Nova Scotia's energy sector, Mr. Speaker. This group is willing, prepared to pay 2,600 or 26,000 times more than the deal in Bear Island, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask the minister, why have NSBI not contacted ConocoPhillips and TransCanada Pipelines regarding Bear Head and the development there?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, that member knows that very clearly that the competition for LNG and the sites that are going to be available for development are very limited, and ensure that any position that and development from Nova Scotia is indeed competitive. And we have to ensure that the people of the Strait area that are endorsing this project have the support of this government in the preliminary phases of any development, Mr. Speaker, and that member is being totally irresponsible at this time for the project for the Strait area.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Hear, hear.
Order, please. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the minister responsible for the status of women. As the minister may be aware, in May 2003, a planning report was presented to the Minister of Community Services entitled Enhancing and Strengthening Women's Services in Nova Scotia. To date, the minister has not formally responded to this report, leaving me to believe that it may not be high on their agenda. Last year alone, Bryony House was forced to turn away 110 women and children due to lack of resources and space. My question to the minister responsible for the status of women is, given that your government has access to a considerable amount of federal social housing money, would the minister assure this House that she will immediately begin to advocate for emergency funding to be given to Bryony House?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Yes, I have been in close contact with the council, and at this point in time, those concerns have not come forward.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
I'm surprised to hear they haven't come forward, Mr. Speaker. However, the report from the Coalition also recommended additional funding to Bryony House in the amount of $173,065. It was very specific, to ensure that they are able to adequately provide programs. However, Mr. Speaker, this government's tax scheme next year will see an additional $147 million less available for such needed programs and services.
Shame.
Given the cuts that this government will no doubt have to make, my question again for the minister is, will the minister responsible for the status of women commit to ensuring that Bryony House will have the money it needs in the next fiscal year?
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the status of women.
I'm going to refer that question to the Minister of Community Services.
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for her question. She may have missed it here yesterday, but that question came up then, and it was pointed out that when the Coalition submitted their report to the department, that they asked that we respond by the fall, and we committed that we would meet that timeline. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Again, for the minister responsible for the status of women, this government, Mr. Speaker, has had a chance yesterday to address the serious financial situation of the province by cancelling the tax scheme. They chose not to, and there will now no doubt be more program cuts. It is this minister's responsibility to advocate on behalf of vulnerable women and children in the province. My question to the minister is, how can the minister responsible for the status of women support the government's tax scheme when vital services for women and children remain in jeopardy?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to advise the member opposite that It is a priority of this government, all the concerns of women. I do plan on representing those concerns, and at budget time, I will take those back to the table. Thank you.
The member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've been talking about some very specific mental health issues in this House over the past few days. And Mr. Speaker, autism and autism spectrum disorder are not the only mental health issues that this government needs to attend to. Many of us remember the former Minister of Health and her announcements over the spring session. One announcement she made at the IWK in February. At that time, that minister promised 2 new intensive community-based mental health treatment centers for children and youth. One of these was to be housed in the Via Rail train station with 7 professionals on the treatment team, and the 12-bed facility was to open last month. So, Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister is whether he can tell this House if the treatment center for children and youth opened last month and whether or not it is now fully staffed.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the best of my knowledge, it is not yet open, but we anticipate that happening relatively soon. Thank you.
The Honourable Member Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the facility, as I understand it, is under construction, and I think it would be difficult for the minister to convince this House that those services are being delivered, services that are really needed. Mr. Speaker, I would say that frontline patient care is being affected by the lack of services there. So I want to focus my next question, Mr. Speaker, on a more specific aspect of this proposed treatment center. Mr. Speaker, through you to the minister, will the minister tell this House whether any of the positions associated with this center are being held up because of the IWK hiring freeze?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the best of my knowledge, the facility will proceed, and when construction is completed, will be operational.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Thank you. Well, I didn't hear the minister say that it would be fully staffed. Mr. Speaker, I'll table the human resources pages of the IWK's website when it announced its hiring freeze. On this page, one of the positions is for a clinical psychologist for this proposed treatment center, and I also understand there is no psychiatrist in place for this center either. So will the minister please admit today that his government is making badly needed frontline mental health services one of its first casualties for its budget cuts?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the plan was for that facility to proceed, and Mr. Speaker, it is our intention for the facility to proceed.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, in September 2002, the Minister's Department received a generous contribution of $18.6 million from the federal government for the sole purpose of constructing affordable social housing. One project totaling $375,000 was announced in November, but since then, Mr. Speaker, not a single social housing project has been approved. Winter is fast approaching, Mr. Speaker, and across this province there are countless numbers of Nova Scotians trying to survive without adequate shelter. So my question to the Minister, will he provide this House before the end of business day today a complete list of any other social housing projects completed in the 12 months between September 2002 and 2003? And if no such projects exist, will the Minister please explain what happened to the remaining $18,225,000?
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question, because this is something which is very much a concern of this government and a concern of mine. We are very pleased that the federal government decided to get back into social housing. They had withdrawn in 1993. The collective impact of those cuts in 1993 over time. The cumulative impact was over $1 billion. We're very pleased that they're back at the table. We're pleased that they put the $18.63 million in, and we will be announcing a program shortly, and we are looking forward to getting applications from the various organizations across the province.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister indicated what the federal government put in, but he didn't indicate what the provincial government put in. So it leaves one to wonder. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Community Services was also given an additional $11 million from the federal government past April. That money, too, was earmarked for social housing, though you'd never know it when you look around the province. In fact, not 1 cent has been spent on providing adequate housing for the people in need. So my question to the minister is, will the minister explain why, upon receipt of that additional $11 million, he chose to cut the province's share of funding for a housing program in Nova Scotia from $17.5 million to $8.9 million.
Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of things that could perhaps be straightened out in the preamble to that question. The first thing that should be straightened out is that the federal government has made 2 announcements, one for $680 million, and our share of which is the $18.63 million. They subsequently announced another $320 million, and they're still working out the details as to how they're going to divvy that up. With regards to the province's contribution, it comes through the Nova Scotia Housing Development Corporation. There is an account there, and the amount that actually shows in the books depends on the amount that we draw down in that particular year. Thank you.
Member of Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the best part of this fiscal year is over, and the minister hasn't done anything. He hasn't done anything for the needy people of this province, and it begs one to wonder if he ever will. Mr. Speaker, the budget cuts that have been a fact of life for this government, and as the Minister of Finance tries to come to terms with a rapidly growing deficit, there will undoubtedly be more hardship. So my question to the Minister, will the Minister provide immediate emergency funding from the largely untouched social housing program to charitable organizations, churches, shelters such as Bryony House? Excuse me for my lack of understanding the word, Mr. Speaker, but essentially, Mr. Speaker, such that are necessary to the component of the social safety net in this province. And if the minister is not prepared to do that, would he please explain why not?
Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, actually, I'm glad the member opposite brought up this question, because one of the things that I do look forward to doing over the next number of months is being able to make announcements about that much-needed affordable housing for Nova Scotians. And, Mr. Speaker, of course, it should be pointed out that while the member opposite is referred to are being given this $18.63 million, in fact, it's available to us under very specific circumstances, and we have to meet those circumstances in order to draw it down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the minister responsible for EMO. As we all know, Hurricane Juan played havoc with our trees. Residents of the Halifax Regional Municipality were told to put out on the curb their tree sections no longer than 4 feet and branches no longer than 8 feet for cleanup by our crews. The crews are continuing that cleanup efforts until midnight Friday. However, many people may still have more debris to contend with after the strong winds last night. My question to the minister is, can residents of HRM expect to have this cleanup service extended?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
For those details and those programs, I would suggest the Honourable member contact on behalf of her constituents the municipality of Halifax.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
We'll be glad to hear that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question now is to the Minister of DOT, Department of Transportation. Many residents who live outside the core area of Dartmouth, of HRM, have many large lots with numerous trees. Some of these lots have a huge amount of trees, and some people have lost hundreds of trees on their properties. These residents have been doing as requested and as directed by the municipality to cut up their branches and cut up these logs and place them on the roadside. Some of these piles are gigantic. They've been putting these things out for days, for weeks. In correspondence from an HRM community response team member to a rural community, it states that they are looking for volunteers to help in this cleanup on Saturday and Sunday. It refers to the cleanup as cleaning up brush and branches only in the HRM rural areas. My question to the minister responsible for DOT is, what is your department going to do to assist in the cleanup of these areas, and especially in the cleanup of still these large trees that are being piled up on the side of the road?
The Honourable Minister of Department of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Transportation has been doing a tremendous job outside of the core area picking up brush, Mr. Speaker, and we're continuing on the basis that that as long as the need is there, we're going to cooperate and take those actions necessary to remove the debris on the sides of the roads.
Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, many residents have not seen any of the DOT trucks. So my question now for the Minister responsible for the Department of Transportation is, residents in rural Nova Scotia pay their taxes the same as everybody else. They already had to wait longer for their electrical hookup. Now they're still waiting to see one of those nice trucks drive by their house and pick up these humongous piles of debris. I mean, these are big piles. Are they going to lay there all winter for the snow to pile up on them? What's going to happen with these piles? I believe that the rural residents in Nova Scotia deserve the same kind of service that we have all over the rest of the province. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister. When are our rural residents going to get their much-awaited cleanup? They're not seeing these trucks.
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, it was a long question. I think the short answer will be that I will provide the honourable member tomorrow morning with a list of the roads that we have been working on and our schedule for the next few weeks.
The honourable member for Halifax, Shabukdo.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a question I would like to direct to the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization. Mr. Speaker, last week, shortly after Hurricane Juan, we raised with the minister, as an example of damage done, the instance of a business located in downtown Dartmouth and owned by Richard Bonner. This is a lighting business for which the roof was blown off. I'm looking now for some updated information from the minister. In this case, the building filled with water and equipment and phones were damaged. Mr. Bonner is not insured for hurricanes because he could no longer afford the extended coverage insurance. To make matters worse, he is unlikely to get 1 cent of disaster relief, as we understood the programs last week. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the minister responsible for EMO. Many Nova Scotians could not afford insurance that included special hurricane coverage. What is the current state of play about what the minister's government is going to do to help them?
The honourable minister responsible for EMO.
Thank you very much. And certainly, as the member described Mr. Bonner's case, if it was overland flooding, I would recommend that the honourable member recommend to Mr. Bonner or have him contact EMO and apply at one of the service centres, because certainly overland flooding, if the conditions meets the regulations, is eligible for DFFA disaster relief.
I'll member for Halifax, Shabukdo on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, again, using Mr. Bonner's instance as an example, the situation has since grown worse. Since the hurricane, Mr. Bonner has had plastic sheeting over his roof. But during last night's storm, the sheeting was blown off and his building now has even more water damage. Mr. Bonner needs a new roof. He says if he can't get help to replace his roof, he will have to go out of business and he will have to declare bankruptcy. Other homes and businesses were hit hard last night because trees and buildings had been weakened by Hurricane Juan. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the minister, will these damages suffered last night be included under disaster relief?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we're acutely aware of certainly the plights of a number of Nova Scotians, and that is why the province of Nova Scotia announced on Friday past that $10 million of provincial money would be dedicated to the program.
Member for Halifax-Shabukta on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, as we all know, it's simply not good enough. Hurricane Juan is one of the worst disasters ever to hit this province. So far, the government has made every attempt to absolve itself from responsibility in helping people recover in the measure that's needed. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the Minister just how many Nova Scotians is he willing to allow to go without any assistance in recovering from this disaster?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I think it's extremely important to note that EMO responded quickly, and there's no question that the volunteers, staff, and all the organizations involved responded well in the initial response to the hurricane. The province is the only level of government that's first off of the mark. They have put up $10 million to assist Nova Scotians damaged by the hurricane, and even though the honourable member will not acknowledge that, I certainly encourage him to contact his federal counterparts and the federal government to ask them to honour their responsibility as well.
The honourable member for Richmond.
This week, Mr. Speaker, much to the dismay of residents in the Strait area, the Strait Richmond Emergency Room will remain closed during the weekdays for an additional week. Mr. Speaker, this will mark well over a month that the emergency room has been closed at the Strait Richmond Hospital, placing additional pressure on the emergency room at St. Anne's Nursing Care Centre in Arishat and other local hospitals. Mr. Speaker, residents in the Strait area are once again left feeling neglected by the Tory government and the Minister of Health. My question: will the minister finally admit whether his government's attempts to find a temporary doctor for the Strait Richmond Hospital have failed, or has his department given up entirely on the health care needs of residents in the Strait area?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The search for a physician to provide for the needs of that area is a very high priority of the department, and working very closely with the DHA in order to find someone to fill that vacancy, and it is a priority, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, we're hearing it's a high priority at Strait Richmond. It's a high priority for Spring Hill, Soldiers Memorial, Glace Bay. Right. All high priorities, all emergency rooms that are closed. Yeah. Residents are getting sick and tired in these communities around this province of hearing excuses from this minister. Because as much as he says a high priority, as we stand here today, this government continues to employ one individual who is charged with recruiting physicians to this province and finding physicians for these communities from one end of this province to the next. Right. One person, yet the minister says it is a high priority. Mr. Speaker, the health care needs of the residents of Nova Scotia deserve a better answer. My question to the minister is, will the minister commit today to working with the DHAs and make the necessary investments to ensure that this roller coaster ride of emergency room closures, especially in the Strait area, are finally brought under control?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We are working on a continuous basis with the DHA to fulfill that shortage. And I can tell the honourable member that it is not the responsibility of a single person. It is the responsibility of the DHAs, of the community. And in recent times, I was in the South Shore and saw an excellent example of the community reacting to recruit physicians in that area. It involved the MLA for the area. It involved people from the DHA. It involved people from the community. And so that, Mr. Speaker, is the kind of effort all of us have to be prepared to make to ensure that the needs of our communities are met.
The honourable member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is blessed with volunteers who give of their time freely to donate of their time to help working towards addressing the healthcare needs in their communities. For the minister to say that it is those individuals who bear responsibility of keeping emergency rooms open in this province is completely unacceptable. Our volunteers are doing everything they can, yet at the end of the day, responsibility lies with the minister, and when an emergency room is closed, the person to blame for that is the Minister of Health. He bears full responsibility for the health care needs of the residents of this province, and it's unacceptable to continue to stand in this House and allow emergency rooms to remain closed. Mr. Speaker, because of the fact that the minister is willing to sit here and see these closures continually taking place, it leaves Nova Scotians questioning the priority of this government to those institutions. Now, my final supplementary is, will the minister commit today and give his personal guarantee that emergency room services at the Strait Richmond, Soldiers Memorial, Glace Bay, and All Saints Hospital will continue to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even after next spring's budget?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, it is the priority of this government to attract physicians to this province, and we have been attracting more and more year after year. And there are vacancies, and we're working very hard to fulfill those vacancies. But, Mr. Speaker, we put additional money into health care, we put additional money into the DHAs, and the money is available for them. There is a huge challenge with respect to recruitment. It will be an ongoing challenge, Mr. Speaker, and we're prepared to accept that challenge and work very hard at fulfilling the vacancies.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question will be for the minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization. Mr. Speaker, woodlot owners have been devastated by Hurricane Juan. Earl Tanner of Hardwood Lands was named Woodlot Owner of the Year a couple of years ago for the Central region, and his woodlot was a showcase in this province. 80% of his woodlot was destroyed by Hurricane Juan. Small woodlot owners and maple syrup operations in this province are now in a tragic position and have heard little from this government. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister, what specific steps are you going to take to help these woodlot owners?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as we announced last Friday, we've put up $10 million, and one of the conditions on that $10 million was an expanded DFAA disaster program that would address some of the needs of the commercial livestock or agriculture industry, the commercial fishing industry, as well as woodlot owners affected by the damage of Hurricane Juan.
The honourable member for Hants East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the minister also said in his statement that he would come back this week with specifics for those individuals, and he hasn't done that yet. Mr. Speaker, for many small woodlot owners, their woodlot was the only long-term security they had. They used their woodlots as a pension plan, harvesting what they needed and receiving small proceeds every year. Now they're forced to harvest everything that fell immediately. This will throw them into a higher tax bracket, eliminating their long-term security. Both the provincial and federal governments stand to profit from Hurricane Juan through taxes on these woodlot owners. So my question to the Minister of Finance, will you provide tax relief for small woodlot owners in this province so that they can secure the proceeds from their woodlots?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister of VMO has indicated some of the plans that are available, and specifically, I can give him the question, he can finalize that. But we will follow the recommendations of the Minister of VMO as he encompasses all the different areas across this province that need support.
The honourable member for Hants East on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister responsible for VMO has recommendations. He didn't give us any in his answer to the last question. Mr. Speaker, it's small woodlot owners like Earl Tanner that desperately need tax relief from this government. This is not a time for governments to profit on the most negatively affected by Hurricane Juan, but it's a time to help. Since decoupling from the federal tax system, the province has some flexibility in this regard. So my question to the Minister of Finance, what will it take for your government to do the right thing and provide tax relief for small woodlot owners?
The honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll let the Minister of VMO elaborate on his plan.
Responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much. And as I answered to the previous question, we have an expanded DFA program that we've offered to the federal government. We put cash forward. But I would recommend to the honourable member the federal government bears a huge amount of responsibility in helping out affected woodlot owners or farmers or fishermen in Nova Scotia with this disaster of the hurricane. And I would certainly urge the honourable member to ask his federal party leader, who came a little late to view the results, to lobby the federal government as well and raise the issue in the federal House.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, business leaders and residents are very excited in the Strait area to propose LNG and marine storage facility anticipated for Bear Head in Richmond County. Municipal officials, local MLAs, union reps have all echoed strong support for this project. Yet today, Mr. Speaker, residents in the Strait area are left scratching their heads after learning that a similar proposal for Harpswell, Maine will see that community earn up to $400 million US for leasing out land for a similar LNG plant. So my question to the Minister of Energy, could he explain to us and to residents in the Strait area why his government has chosen to sell 64 hectares of land at Bear Head for just $2 million Canadian?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and obviously there is an echo in the chamber today of questions. However, it gives me an opportunity to reiterate the realities of LNG activity. And aside from the site in Maine, there's other proposed development within the Boston, New York area. That competition is very fierce and severe. The actual access to sites in the United States is much different than land that's available here. And indeed, the people of the Strait area are looking for those types of opportunities. That project in question is very much in the preliminary stages. And Mr. Speaker, we're trying to ensure economic viability and success of an LNG facility here in Nova Scotia. And to do anything else with regards to what's happening in the United States, those companies are not here in Canada, and the one company that is here in Canada working to development, we need to give them the benefit of the doubt and support them in their efforts at this time.
The honourable member for Richmond on your first supplementary.
Speaker, this comes down simply to a question that residents want to know if they are getting a good deal and value for money here. It's also very important to realize that this is prime land for industrial development. The project calls for 17 hectares of land, yet the government is now looking at selling 64 hectares of land at Bear Head for this project. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we know that the project itself is a proposal which they expect to last for a 20-year period. My question to the Minister is, has his government put in the necessary protection to maximize land use in Bear Head and possibly include an option to buy back the land after the 20-year project date?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the government is very concerned, and also with regards to the types of developments that happen in the area. But to the member's comment about the significance of this, when you consider a project that being in excess of $500 million that would ensure that key investment would be made, that strategic positioning with regards to other oil and gas initiatives would be there. We've responded with regards to access to that land, and specifics to the land situation would be referred to the Minister of Economic Development for NSBI.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
The member certainly asked, I think, a very reasonable question, and the Minister of Energy has pointed out that this is a significant development with major spin-offs for the area in Nova Scotia in employment through the development phase as well as operating phase. But in the long term of the gas and oil industry, members across the floor has urged this government to do anything they can and support projects that help promote other related gas and oil industries. This piece, if it's successful, is critical to the development on a fast-track basis here in Nova Scotia.
Now, member for Richmond on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased the Minister did point out it was a reasonable question, because the residents of the Strait area, I think, have been exemplary in how they have treated this project proposal, and everyone coming to work together, of supporting it, from the Chamber of Commerce, municipal officials, and everyone else. Yet when you see a news story today, like what we've seen in the Herald, one has to expect that residents are going to have some concern about that. We do realize that transporting the gas down to the U.S. is not just a few drives, a few miles away. It requires a pipeline and additional costs. The question to the Minister of Energy, in light of the information that residents have read today about the proposal in Maine, is it the position of your department and your government that the project being proposed at Bear Head is a good deal for the residents of the Strait area and a good deal for the people of Nova Scotia?
Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, I would hope that the member from that area would recognize that any project in its upfront development stage that would put $500 million into his constituency would be a good deal for any project or any constituency in the province of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, adoption disclosure legislation has sat on the back burner in Nova Scotia for nearly 4 years. Adoptees have fought long and hard for improved access to birth records, going as far as pleading their case before the United Nations. The United Nations has recognized the basic human right of knowing one's birth identity, roots, and medical history. While this issue has remained unaddressed by this Nova Scotian government, adoptees searching for identifying information must wait 3 years. Mr. Speaker, this is unnecessary, it is unacceptable, and it is unfair. So I ask the Minister of Community Services, why is your government refusing to show some leadership and try to find a solution to this issue?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for bringing up this point again today. Mr. Speaker, I think leadership means going out and listening to Nova Scotians, hearing what they have to say, and in fact that was done in 1999 and it's been done since then. And what they have to say to us is that there is no consensus in this province as to what people want in terms of disclosure, adoption disclosure. But, Mr. Speaker, we do recognize that times are changing, and we have changed our practices within the department in anticipation of the time when Nova Scotians send us a message that they want open adoption disclosure. Thank you.
Dartmouth South on your Portland Valley on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there might have been some sensitivity around the issue of unwanted contact, but I think the majority of Nova Scotians made clear in that consultation and during the committee discussions that access to much-needed information wasn't in question. The parents and children in Nova Scotia searching for information are frustrated. And not only have they watched as the legislation withered and died on the floor of this House and in committees, but the present system is a nightmare. Staff at Community Services need more resources to address the backlog to at least alleviate the problem. Mr. Speaker, my question through you to the Minister, what assurances can you offer adoptees and parents that this backlog will be addressed?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is quite right. There was a backlog that was created when we started giving out the information free of charge. We're pleased that people care about getting their adoption records. And, Mr. Speaker, in that regard, we have put another staff member in place exclusively to deal with the backlog. Thank you.
Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, in your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia is one of the provinces criticized by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child because it doesn't meet the minimal standards of the UN Charter on the Rights of the Child. And this problem cannot be and will not be solved by rhetoric and empty promises and small increases in staff. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister, children and parents are waiting for action. When will they get an issue on the broader question of access and timely access to this information?
Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's very clear that we're going to continue to try to represent Nova Scotia's wishes as best we can as a government. We'll continue to do that. I look forward personally to the day when perhaps open adoption records are acceptable to the majority of Nova Scotians. But, Mr. Speaker, I think that we should speak to the success of this. 97% of the searches are successful, and in 80% of those cases, the birth parents agree to contact with the adult adoptee, and I think that that speaks for itself, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, in the aftermath of Hurricane Juan, it's incumbent on all levels of government to ensure that everything that could have been done was done. I note with some interest that out of concern or caution, the URB has made the decision to review the practice and procedures of the Nova Scotia Power Corporation. My question for the Premier is, out of an abundance of caution perhaps, would he agree that similarly a review of the practices and procedures of the government departments and agencies surrounding Juan would be a prudent step at this time?
The Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer that to the Minister responsible for EMO.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, two things. I think it's important to note that it is normal practice that the URAB examines within 2 weeks Nova Scotia Power's performance, and I think that's a good thing, and certainly Nova Scotians will be interested to see their findings as well. The Emergency Measure Organization does after every crisis does a debrief, thorough with all the individuals and organizations involved, and we will be making that public once it's completed.
Leader of the Liberal Party, on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is an issue of leadership for the Premier. The question was to the Premier about whether or not he was prepared to do some kind of a review. It's our duty to do whatever we can to protect the lives of Nova Scotians. Will you do that and do a review, sir?
The Honourable the Premier. You have about 3 seconds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not sure.
Order, please. Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Order, please. Just before we move on to government business, I'd like to provide for the House a ruling in regards to an issue that was brought before the House on Tuesday by the Honourable Member for Cape Breton West. On Tuesday, the 14th of October, 2003, at the end of question period, the Honourable Member for Cape Breton West rose on a point of order. The issue was the Honourable Member brought before the House was in regards to a letter. Order, please. To a letter that was tabled by the Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West cited Section 491, subsection 1 of Beauchesne, which states, an unsigned letter should not be read in the House. He also further quoted Section 498, subsection 3, which states, when quoting a letter in the House, a member must be willing to either give the name of the author or take full responsibility for the contents. The Honourable House Leader for the official opposition stated that although the rules in Beauchesne state one thing, he felt that what has become custom in this House over the last number of years should be adhered to. The Honourable House Leader for the Government Party stated that in many cases the document itself is restricted by the person who has provided it to the member, and if it is not signed, as in this particular case, it becomes a worthless document if it can't be used. Historically in parliaments, only ministers were able to table documents in the House. In some jurisdictions, the rules remain strict in that regard, but in others, such as ours here in Nova Scotia, practices have changed and private members can table some documents in the course of debate. I have looked at past rulings on this issue in this House and in other jurisdictions and have concluded that even in those jurisdictions that are more permissive about what can be tabled, the practice is that unsigned or unattributed documents should not be put before the House. I refer to a ruling by a former Speaker on November 15, 1993. A member wanted to read from a letter and eliminate the identity of the person who wrote it. The Speaker interceded and stated that the reading of an anonymous letter is out of order, according to Beauchesne. He further stated that an unsigned letter should not be read in the House. In that particular case, the letter was signed and was tabled with the signature and therefore was allowed. This being the first time I've had to rule in regards to a letter that has been brought before the House, which is being tabled, and whether or not it is in order. The rules of Beauchesne state that quite clearly that an unsigned letter should not be read in the House, and in fact, a member must be willing to give the name of the author or to take full responsibility of the contents if quoting from that letter. The letter that has been tabled in this House at this time has not been signed, and in fact, it appears that the information that would reveal the author has been omitted. Any document that is not tabled in its entirety is incomplete and therefore out of order. It is my ruling that the member who tabled this document has to table to the House the letter in its full content, clearly indicating the author with their signature, or the letter will be withdrawn. In this particular case, the Honourable Member did not read directly from the letter. If he did, he would have to be willing to give the name of the author for the record, or again to take full responsibility for the contents. In future, and I'd ask all honourable members to pay heed to this, please. In the future, any member who is going to table or read a letter or quote from a letter should first announce that it is in fact signed by the author. A further issue that arises out of this point of order being brought to the House is that of electronic communication, or emails, which make up a great percentage of the correspondence between individuals today. MLAs will receive on a regular basis emails from constituents bringing forward issues and concerns. These emails, like other forms of correspondence, will make their way to this legislature and ultimately will be tabled by MLAs. I will be requesting that all members of this House, when attempting to read from emails and/or table these forms of communication, that they first ensure the name of the author is on the email and that the MLA is prepared to disclose the identity of the author and to take full responsibility of the contents before it is tabled in this House. Copies of this ruling are available for any members who wish to review it or take charge of it. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for third reading?
Public bills for third reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 7, the Labour Standards Code and Vital Statistics Act?
Bill number 7, Labour Standards Code and Vital Statistics Act. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
I'd like to move this bill now be read for third reading.
House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 7, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 246 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Labour Standards Code, and Chapter 494 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Vital Statistics Act.
Order the bill do pass. Order the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 8, the Volunteer Protection Act?
Bill number 8, the Volunteer Protection Act.
Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, I move third reading of Bill number 8.
Bill number 8, the Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to briefly say that this is a minor change to the legislation to allow for costs at solicitor and client rates for a volunteer who's been sued. That's a noble amendment. We don't have a problem with that. I would just like to reiterate on the record once again that this government has not done very much to educate the public, particularly volunteers, as to their rights. And now that this legislation has been passed for some time, clearly, if it is meant to help organizations, volunteer organizations, seek more volunteers, that also must include an educational component to ensure that that is part of it as well. And having said that, we will be supporting this bill.
Is the House ready for the question? Motion is for third reading of Bill number 8. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 8, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 14 of the Acts of 2002, the Volunteer Protection Act.
Order the bill be do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 10, the Municipal Elections Act?
Bill number 10. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, I move third reading of Bill number 10.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 10. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
10, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 300 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Municipal Elections Act.
Order the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk. Order the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 15, the Court Jurisdiction and Proceedings Transfer Act?
Bill number 15.
On behalf of the Minister of Justice, I move third reading of Bill number 15.
Motion is for third reading of Bill number 15. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill 15, entitled An Act Respecting Court Jurisdiction and the Transfer of Court Proceedings.
Order the bill do pass, or the title be as read by the clerk, or the bill be engrossed. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call the order of business government motions?
Government motions.
Mr. Speaker, I move the address and reply to the, the adjourned debate to the address and reply to the speech and the throne be now resumed.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to stand before the House today to respond to the speech from the throne on behalf of the people of Annapolis. I am humbled and honored to have been elected to represent the people of Annapolis in the Nova Scotia legislature. I understand that this privilege brings great responsibility, and I intend to serve my constituents to the best of my ability. To Premier Ham and Opposition Leader Darrell Dexter and their respective teams, I extend my congratulations. To the people of this province have given us their trust, and I look forward to working with all of you to build a stronger Nova Scotia for this and future generations. I would like to say to my leader, Danny Graham, and my fellow caucus members, that I feel as if I'm back in my basketball playing days. Sorry, maybe I should say hockey, as I'm not sure that we have the height for basketball. I am confident that this team, under Danny's leadership, will remain united in our dedication to serve the people of Nova Scotia. Like any good team, we will press our opponents and force them to stick to their game plan and meet the commitments they promised Nova Scotians. To the people of Annapolis, I want to thank you for this privilege. I want to pay special thanks to the wonderful people who work tirelessly on my behalf. Your energy and commitment is second to none. To my wife, Andrea, our children, Colleen and Jeffrey, and our considerable extended family, thank you for joining me on this journey. To the many constituents who I visited during the recent election campaign, I heard your concerns. I understand that you are tired of not being heard by this government. You have given me the honor of being your voice in the legislature, and I intend to make sure that this government hears the voices of the people of Annapolis. Mr. Speaker, I listened to the speech from the throne with great interest. I wanted to hear the commitments that this government was making to the people of Nova Scotia and indirectly the people of Annapolis. I have to say that I was disappointed. In particular, I was disappointed that the rural economy was ignored in the speech. Farming, fishing, forestry, and tourism are the pillars of the Nova Scotia economy, and my riding is no different. The people who work in these industries are strong, hardworking, and resilient, and deserve some attention from this government. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to address an issue of concern for many of my constituents. This government needs to join me in supporting an owner-operator and fleet separation program for the lobster fishery. An owner-operator and fleet separation program will ensure that money earned in these boats stays in the communities instead of going to a corporate head office with very little benefit to the local community. The recent open farm days gave me an opportunity to visit some of the farms in my riding. The people of Annapolis are proud of their nationwide recognition for their apples, but they also want the government to know that agriculture is a diverse resource in our riding. Dairy, beef, turkey, vegetables, grain, cranberries, to name but a few. In Lawrencetown, each year, the Annapolis County Exhibition showcases art, crafts, and agriculture from the area. This year, for the first time, Lawrencetown played host to the highly successful Nova Scotia 4-H provincial show. I do applaud this government's statement that it will take steps to ensure immediate assistance for our beef and cattle farmers who are dealing with the after effects of the mad cow scare. I am not sure, however, of this government's definition of immediate. Our farmers have been dealing with drought, flood, and BSE for over a year, and this government has done little to nothing to help them. Mr. Speaker, I also listened to this speech to understand this government's commitment to the arts and culture. It appears as if this government has forgotten that the unique, vibrant culture of Nova Scotia is what draws many tourists to our province and injects much-needed money to our economy. In Annapolis, there are many examples of people working to celebrate our culture, and it feels as if this government has been asleep at the tourism wheel. If the tourism minister spent some time in Annapolis, he would see many examples of people building a future by respecting our past. He could visit the Annapolis Valley McDonald Museum, the Memory Lane Railroad Museum in Middleton, to see facilities quietly generating economic growth for this region. A little further down the road, the people of Annapolis Royal and region recognize their privilege to live in Canada's birthplace. They have complemented their heritage sites with cultural experiences of King's Theatre and the Arts Council, to name but a few. In Annapolis Royal, they have been working for many years to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the settlement of Port Royal. As a young student, my teacher took my classmates and I to Port Royal so that we could experience the life as our first European settlers did. The 400th Society wants 2005 to be a year of celebration of French culture, commerce, and colonialization. They plan to celebrate the music, art, theatre, and culture of not only the Acadians, but the Mi'kmaq and the African American settlers of this region as well. This celebration is a mere 15 months away, and it is time for this government to step up to the plate and put funding in place so that the 400th Society can hire a full-time coordinator to capitalize on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But, Mr. Speaker, the single biggest threat to tourism in my riding is the conditions of the highways. I challenge this government to adopt a Liberal campaign promise and to put all gasoline tax into highways. The people of Annapolis would also like me to add our voices to the education discussion. On behalf of the people of Annapolis, I support any initiative to reduce class sizes, provide additional support for special needs students, and establish a Healthy Starts program for preschool children. Mr. Speaker, for too long, education has been ignored in my riding. Appreciation and credit should be given to the men and women who look after our schools, as they have done a superb job in maintaining our school buildings. In spite of their best effort, however, age is taking its toll on our schools. When this government went on a spending spree last spring, there was no mention of Annapolis. Mr. Speaker, the people of Annapolis have asked me to remind this government of two outstanding educational projects in the riding. Long before my children were young students at Bridgetown Regional Elementary School, it was first decided that their school needed some capital investment to build a new gymnasium and cafeteria. The school board considers this project a priority, but it continues to be put on the back burner. My daughter is now in junior high school, and my son will soon follow. Will they be high school graduates before Bridgetown Elementary School gets its new gymnasium and cafeteria? Mr. Speaker, I personally support a proposal to build a new gymnasium at Milton Regional High School, which will move the music class into the multi-purpose room. The acoustics in the current music room are so bad that it's causing concerns for the health and safety of the music teacher. This proposal has been approved in principle by the school board, but what is needed is government support. One of the interesting aspects of this $1.8 million proposal is that the community will raise half the monies. I should repeat that. The communities will raise half the monies. I congratulate the people of the area for this initiative and challenge the government to support their ingenuity by contributing their share to this necessary project. Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to hear this government acknowledge that health care is the #1 concern of Nova Scotians. I can say that the people of Annapolis want this government to understand that health care must be their #1 priority, a priority this government has ignored for too long. The people of Annapolis applaud their health care providers. These men and women have worked tirelessly in face of continued cuts at both Soldiers Memorial Hospital and the Annapolis Community Health Center. And when our communities protested, this government's answer was to put a $2 parking toll at these facilities, with none of the revenue generated being returned to Annapolis. Mr. Speaker, the people of Annapolis have asked me to remind this government that rural Nova Scotia deserves their share of health care funding. The people of Annapolis deserve access to faster diagnosis and better treatment. Seniors in Annapolis have asked for the right to remain in their homes as long as possible, and they they deserve accessible medical resources in the region. The people of Annapolis are pleased to hear that this government is committed to introducing legislation that will provide Nova Scotians caring for a family member in the last stages of life immediate access to benefits that will allow them to take time off work. I was also pleased to hear that this government speak of a lifestyle choice to support healthy living. I fully support this thinking, but encourage the government to embrace a Liberal campaign promise and commit 10% of lottery tax revenue into sport and recreation programs and facilities. On behalf of the people of Annapolis, I would like to add to this government's acknowledgement of the men and women who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces. Too often we take for granted the personal sacrifices of our servicemen and women and their families. In Annapolis, we are proud of our friends, neighbors, and family members who serve this country. Madam Speaker, in closing, I would like to express again the pride I take in standing before you as the representative for the people of Annapolis. I am humbled by their confidence in me, and I look forward to working together with my constituents, my fellow representatives, to build a stronger and vibrant Annapolis and a strong and vibrant Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a real honor to rise today to reply to the speech from the throne. It is quite humbling to stand in the place for the first time in this historic chamber and to think about the people who occupied this place before us. People like Sir Charles Tupper, Sir John Thompson, and Robert Stanfield. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate all members on their election to the legislature. I believe this minority government gives us a unique opportunity to work together to make a better Nova Scotia. I know that every member of the legislature shares this common goal of making Nova Scotia an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. I would also like to recognize the candidates from all parties who are not successful in their election bids. I hope they continue to serve their communities. And I know all members appreciate the hard work and dedication those candidates demonstrated in the weeks leading up to August the 5th. It was a great summer to have a campaign office overlooking the LaHave River. We had the perfect spot just off to one side of the bridge. I know I would not have been successful in getting elected had it not been for the great number of hardworking people. I cannot say enough about the people who volunteered. The headquarters was humming morning, noon, and night. Young and the not so young gathered as we discussed the issues of the day. It reminded me of the pictures of yesteryear showing the gathering of friends around a pot-bellied stove. Among those volunteered, I'd like to single out my mother, Rita Bolivar, who daily was on the campaign trail. Whether she was out on the road with me or in campaign headquarters volunteering, running errands, doing whatever needed to be done. Then there was my cousin, Reverend Leo Conrad, who flew home from Alberta for a 2-week working vacation. His dedication and support was overwhelming. Day after day, he spent at campaign headquarters keeping me on track and reassuring me that things were all going good. Leo, at this time, I would like to say thank you, and hopefully your next visit to the South Shore will be more of an enjoyable one on your part. Although I know that you said you enjoyed it, I think you'd rather have been looking at more of the sights that we have here on the South Shore. I'd also like to mention Helen Fairbanks, 82 years young, as keen and as excited at any campaign supporter a fraction of her age. Helen would meet me at campaign headquarters, be raring to go, and 9 o'clock at night she'd be saying, "Do we have to stop now?" Helen walked many miles in rain and in shine. Then there was people like Melba, Phyllis, Helen, Dawn, Madeline, Wendy, and Bill, who volunteered for just about anything. These people represent the best qualities within all Nova Scotians, caring and giving individuals. I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to thank my family, my husband, Brian, my children, Ryan, 12, Kelsey, 11, and Conrad, 8. My brothers, Bernie, Barry, and Wayne, my sisters, Wendy, Shelley, and Marianne, and their families for their continued love and support throughout the campaign. As I embarked on a new chapter in my life, I certainly could not have did it without their support. My campaign team was second to none, who spent numerous hours organizing my schedule and my entire campaign. I would like to thank Brent Silver, my campaign manager, for putting up with me. I'm not used to being told what to do, especially by a man. But at the end of the day, we left as friends, and I can still see him standing there shaking his head. You're used to doing things your way, aren't you? To my office manager, Tom Bird, who kept me organized to achieve my mandate of knocking on every door in my constituency, I would like to thank him. And I would also like to thank Tom for accepting the position of EA, and I look forward to a continued good working relationship. My official agent, Jeff Sabian, and Bob Seelig, who worked vigorously to assure that the financial means was there to run a successful campaign. Again, the Lunenburg West PC Association and the Lunenburg West PC Women's Association need to be commended for being one of the strongest organizations in the province. My success was dependent on all these people who went out of their way to make this campaign successful. My sisters, Wendy and Shelley, really need to be thanked, along with the float team they put together to have one of the most beautiful floats in the South Shore Bridgewater Parade. I would like to thank the MLAs who participated, Michael Baker, John Chataway, and Kerry Morash. One of my favorite memories from the campaign was the day the South Shore Exhibition Parade passed by the campaign headquarters. I was very pleased to be riding on this float with friends and thoroughly enjoyed the ride along King Street. Farmers, businesses, and individual residents from all walks of life participated. Seeing the bright eyes of smiling faces on hundreds of children was enough reward in itself. As you know, Madam Speaker, the beautiful LaHave Valley, the banana belt of Nova Scotia, is often referred to as the Rhine of Nova Scotia, thanks to its temperate climate and successful farms. The constituency of Lunenburg West comprises excellent farmland, forests, and Christmas tree land, as well as a fishing industry. We have many lakes, parks, rolling hills, communities, one of which I reside, the beautiful community of Baker Settlement, probably known to very few of you here. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And quaint villages, as well as the town of Bridgewater. There is no record of an event or point of reference as to how this community was named. It is located at the head of navigation at a point where a bridge was erected to cross the river. It is deduced that the community got its name from being the place where the water was bridged. At least 5 bridges have spanned the LaHave River at Bridgewater. Desbrizé reports the first bridge being built in 1825. In 1845, a drawbridge was constructed. Even though there were shipyards upriver from the bridge, it is alleged that the bridge was never raised. In 1869, the bridge was replaced with another wooden bridge. Late in 1891, the first iron bridge was constructed along the north end of the wooden bridge. Although repaired in 1971 when ice took out the east section, the bridge built lasted 100 years and was still in use in 1999. The Veterans Memorial Bridge, a concrete structure, was constructed upriver from the old bridge in 1985. 3 centuries of European settlement in Bridgewater preceded by nearly 60 centuries of Mi'kmaq settlement on the banks of the LaHave River. Bridgewater, located a protected 15 miles inland, was an ideal settlement location. The numerous streams in the area provided ample power for the operation of industrial mills to harvest the hemlock and pine. Madam Speaker, the first house on record on the west side was built by Ralph Hotchkiss in 1812 at the site of the corner of King and Phoenix Streets. The oldest home still standing in Bridgewater is the Ramey House on the east side, perhaps built before the turn of the 19th century. Even then, these 2 emergent settlements were not joined by a bridge until 1825. The Confederation period saw the settlement at Bridgewater develop schools, industries, newspapers, and a fire brigade. Before the turn of the 20th century, the town was being serviced by a regular stagecoach, steamship, a railroad center, and a board of trade. In January of 1900, this growth was dealt a blow by the Big Fire, which completely destroyed the downtown area. 1 month later, the community came together as an incorporated town. 5 months later, a new streetscape greeted visitors to downtown Bridgewater. After the First World War, the growth of industry, automobiles, pavement, and public transit made Bridgewater a town in which many people of today would feel at home. After the Second World War, our town developed improved recreational facilities, including hockey, figure skating, tennis, curling, golf, and baseball. A new park home to new facilities for the Desbrizé Museum added to the quality of life for residents and visitors alike. For members who would like to learn more about Bridgewater and the area should visit the Desbrizé Museum. Museum exhibits feature the natural history, early settlement, cultural and industrial growth of Bridgewater and Lunenburg County from the early 17th century. The museum also has an exhibit center which hosts temporary and traveling exhibitions. Important pieces in the collection include a turn-rest plow made in Lunenburg County about 1800, after a design that was brought here from Central Europe. There is also a decorated cradle with porcupine quill and birch bark panels made at Mahone Bay about 1868. The museum is surrounded by Bridgewater woodland gardens featuring walking trails and picnic areas. I am proud that this government showed its support for this wonderful link in our past with a significant investment through the Community Museum Funding Program this year. Lunenburg West is home to Michelin Tires plant and is known as the Christmas tree capital of the world. Christmas trees that are perfect for export and that find their way